Okay, welcome back everyone to our FinTech and Blockchain course. Today we will be talking about financial technology, or FinTech, and digital sustainability. These are two things that seemingly quite distant, but actually they are very closely related to each other. So to give you a bit of background, as we know, we are now dealing with corporate social responsibility issues. We are now also having to deal with environmental, social, and governance, or ESG factors. And more importantly, many countries in the world are now dealing with 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And this agenda is promoted by the United Nations, and this also plays an important role in dealing with climate change. On the other hand, the growing awareness of global warming and its negative impact on the planet means that customers are now increasingly demanding ecological or environmentally friendly products for a more sustainable lifestyle. Compared to older population, millennials and Generation Z particularly, they are now becoming much more concerned with this kind of issues. And according to Nielsen Media Research reports, 66% of global consumers and 73% of millennials are willing to pay more for environmentally friendly products. So when these customers perceive firms to be socially responsible, they may be more willing to buy the products of these firms at a higher price. Consequently, firms strive to differentiate their products and their brands from their competitors. They setting up green marketing campaigns and modernizing their technologies. These green marketing initiatives are helpful to consumers by letting them know which one is having green properties, but it is only true, it is only beneficial if the claims in advertisement and product descriptions are honest and accurate. And the innovation of green technologies obviously will provide additional financial resources because green investment is an alternative option for financing such modernization. However, the existing competition for obtaining green-oriented investors and consumers will lead to the use of greenwashing by companies as an unfair marketing instrument. So what is greenwashing? Greenwashing is a set of deceptive behaviors or practices that deliberately mislead consumers about the ecological activities of an organization or the environmental benefits of a given product, which appears to be sustainable but are actually not. Such practices are conducted using ambiguous words and images in the description of the environmental features of a product or via fake, unprovable, and even false ecological claims, exaggerating the ecological features of the products by omitting or masking important information or by presenting data in a misleading way. Greenwashing can also be defined as the intersection of two firm behaviors. The first one is poor environmental performance, and the second one is the positive communication about environmental performance. As a result, consumers increasingly mistrust statements regarding CSR because they suspect that they are being lied to or important information is being withheld. Moreover, because greenwashing is not often detected, it thereby does not have any negative consequences for the respective manufacturer or vendor. Investors, furthermore, are increasingly willing to incorporate into their investment decisions not only based on financial criteria like returns, risk, and things like that, but also the non-financial attributes of SRI, and that country-specific factors tend to affect the relationship between corporate social and financial performance of a company. So an example for this is a green bonds instrument. This is a kind of fixed income instrument applied exclusively to the partial or full financing or refinancing of eligible green products. So what is the role of fintech on sustainability? So fintech is quite disruptive because of its great innovation for the financial system and other infrastructure. And this could affect many other areas such as the economy, the society, and the energy sector. Fintech has also several effects on social, environmental, and ecological benefits in promoting the use of funds for energy and environmental projects, as well as the construction of renewable energy and environmental infrastructure that will lead to environmental and ecological development by providing cheap and adequate financing. So sustainability criteria may play an important role in all these changes. Certain initiatives are being increasingly used, such as applications that employ artificial intelligence techniques to monitor the sustainability metrics cited in firms' annual reports and their financial statements. Now, although technology is not often associated with environmental goals, fintech actually shows coherence and continuity with the ESG world, aimed at a more inclusive ESG resilient, circular, and environmental friendly financial system supporting sustainable development. In the G20, they included sustainable digital finance as one of its 2030 work streams. And the UN since 2016 has been studying the link between fintech and sustainable development. Furthermore, digital finance and fintech both play a part in SDG achievement by enhancing the allocation of existing financial resources to support sustainable development, which occurs through the business models, incentives, policies, and regulations to redirect financial resources globally and in individual countries to provide SDG-related finance. So, for example, ESG-related and SRI, particularly in the countries like the European Union, China, and also Japan. Now, the question is, what are the effects of greenwashing in fintech companies? Does it also happen in fintech companies as well? And another question is whether there are possibility of using fintech to promote sustainability and environment-friendly initiatives. Those are the things that we have to think about. Now, before we move on to that question, I want to show you the actual cost for us using the internet. We never really think about this, but actually the internet uses an average of about 5 kilowatt hours to support the utilization of every gigabyte of data, which equates to about 0.51 of energy costs. These are the structure of our internet connection. As you can see, it is being focused on developed countries like in North America, in western part of Europe, and also in Japan and Taiwan. And at this moment, the 5 big players are obviously the United States, China, Russia, Japan, and also India. The interesting thing here is that we can see the similarities between internet topography and the structure of our power grid. So the energy and information technology industry have a startling number of parallels and will do well to learn from each other. We know that the two industries are acutely dependent on the services of each other and must go beyond simply observing each other from across the fence. They will increasingly need to integrate and co-mingle their services and strategies to understand and embrace their unique interdependence. Internet companies will need to develop staff such as energy managers, energy czars, and sustainability directors, for example. On the other hand, utilities companies will also have to develop staff that have knowledge on smart grid network capabilities, and they also have to stop viewing IT departments as cost centers and welcome them into the C-suite where real decisions and planning are actually taking place. So these are the structure of our cloud. Usually when we access the internet via our laptop or our tablet or our mobile phone, we will be connected to our Wi-Fi and modem as well as our LTE-based station. From there, we will be connected to our internet infrastructure and will pass the transmission to the data centers and third-party content delivery networks. In each of these stages, from our device, from our access, from our network and our servers, obviously it will consume energy and it will result in both direct and indirect emissions. These are the illustration of our data center and our servers. It consists of lots of computers with lots of cables and stuff like that. And the most important thing here is that we will require lots of energy. First, we will require energy to power up the machines. And second, we will require energy to keep the temperature down. Because if the temperature is too high, then these machines will not be operating in normal condition. The data center and servers are usually concentrated in the United States, like in Plainfield, Forest City, Altona, Los Lunas, Fort Worth, as well as in other countries like Sweden, Ireland, and Denmark. Now, if we are talking about sustainability, then the global primary energy consumption at this moment still dominated by oil and then followed by coal and natural gas. Only a small portion of the energy consumption was coming from nuclear energy as well as from other sources like hydroelectric and modern renewables. This is also an interesting website that I would suggest you to look into. The website is called Tweetfarts. The website will track the carbon footprint of a hashtag. So if you enter a hashtag at their website, they will calculate the carbon dioxide emissions from today, last 7 days, and all time. Why? Because they realize that the energy it takes to send a tweet will generate 0.02 grams of carbon dioxide. And with 500 million tweets sent daily on Twitter, then it will generate about 10 metric tons of carbon dioxide every single day. So for example, before Donald Trump was banned from Twitter, he tweeted more than 40,000. And it generates at least about 370 kilograms of carbon dioxide output. What about Netflix? I'm sure you are very familiar with Netflix. You spend lots of time watching Korean dramas and other movies and entertainment on Netflix. For example, if we take a typical show with 2 hours of duration, then the total energy use is equivalent to 300 kilowatt hours. Still, this is a huge number in terms of energy use. Now, I want to introduce you with the notion of Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox occurs when technological progress increases the efficiency with which a resource is used, lowering the price of said resource, but the rate of consumption of that resource rises due to increasing demand. For example, previously, if we want to watch movie, then we have to go to the cinema. If we go to the cinema by car, then obviously we will use the energy and we will also produce carbon dioxide. Nowadays, we don't have to do that because of Netflix. With Netflix, we can watch movies from our home or our own room. But we have to realize by enjoying the efficiency, enjoying the convenience of Netflix, we have to realize that there will also be an increasing consumption of that energy due to increasing demand of Netflix. Another thing that I want to introduce to you is the notion of Moore's law. This was taken from Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel Corporation. So he said that overall processing power for computers will double every 2 years. And this can be applied from 1970s to what we have at this moment. From year to year, the increasing power of our computing unit tend to double every 2 years. Another website that I want to suggest you to look into is the Web Neutral Projects. So the website will categorize the other websites that are having sustainability certification. And if they pass the required standard, they will put the carbon neutral badge on the website, like you can see here. Finally, the other thing that I want to suggest you to look into is the Eco-Tree. The Eco-Tree website will calculate and reduce your internet carbon dioxide emission. So you can calculate your internet activities and put the number on their website, and the website will give you the number of how much carbon dioxide that you produce from your activities. So technically, we are now being dominated by big tech companies. We cannot live without Apple. We cannot live without Google. We also cannot live without Facebook. And if you remember what happened a couple of weeks ago, there was massive disruption of Facebook because of mass outage. It was the longest downtime for Facebook since 2008. Because of this, Facebook shares closed down almost 5% when the incident happened. But the thing that is important here is that in countries where Facebook is the internet, like in Indonesia, for example, Facebook is dominating the social media. WhatsApp and Instagram is also being used by so many Indonesians. Then when Facebook is having this problem, the mass outage will cripple the digital economy. The problem that were being faced by the Facebook will also affect what happened in Indonesia as well. So what was actually happened with Facebook? The application was crashed globally for 6 hours on Monday, October 4th, 2021, due to a major power outage. The company issued a statement confirming that the cause of the outage was configuration changes on the backbone routers that coordinate network traffic between their data centers, caused issues that interrupted this communication. It took 5 hours for them to fix the issue because Facebook staff were locked out of their own system, with some even unable to access their office. Facebook's internal system are run from a shared infrastructure, so it took time for employers to realize what was actually causing the issue. Dawn Detector, a website that monitors outage, said there were 10.6 million reports from around the world about the issue. However, many people don't report, and with more than 3.5 billion users, it is estimated to have impacted a bigger part of the world. Because of this, Facebook's share price dropped nearly 5% on Thursday, with the business website Fortune estimating it could cost Mark Zuckerberg an estimated $6 billion US dollars. Could this happen again? Probably, because we have been here before. For example, in March 2019, a similar power outage left Facebook down globally for nearly 14 hours. Now, we know that our life really depends on services like cloud servers, cloud platform, visualization software management, software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and things like that. Our life cannot be separated from the use of data centers and servers like this. Consequently, we will be using more material, we will be consuming more energy. If you are looking on the left-hand side, the scenarios of the evolution of the share of energy consumption in the digital sector is increasing very significantly from 2010 to 2025. On the right-hand side, you will see the global electronic waste. There is also increasing very steadily from 2014 to 2021. So essentially, with the emergence of digital economy, fintech, blockchain, and things like that, it will also result in increasing use of the material as well as increasing use of energy. And because of that, we also have to realize that the possibility of having electronic waste is also increasing. But why electronic waste is problematic? Because electronic waste will be very detrimental for our life. It will be detrimental for our brain, our body system, our lungs, our heart, our kidneys, even our bones. And the part of electronic waste like mobile phone, laptops, screens, and things like that are very difficult to reprocess. So who are the countries that generate most electronic waste? According to Statista, the countries that generate most waste are China, followed by the United States, and then Japan, India, Germany, Brazil, Russia, France, Indonesia, and Italy. These include products like mobile phones, laptops, televisions, electronic equipment, and things like that. Also, according to Statista, the world's worst electronic waste offenders in 2016 are Norway, followed by United Kingdom, Denmark, Australia, Germany, France, Spain, Canada, United States, Japan, Russia, Turkey, Brazil, China, and finally India. Now, the big question is whether COVID-19 boosts our digitalization and push us toward green transition. The question is whether should we seize the unique opportunity or should we not seize this opportunity? Because if we seize the opportunity, then there will be probability to increase our use of electronic resources, of our energy consumption, of our dependency on cloud servers and things like that, or we must not. That's the question that we really have to think about very carefully. Now, regarding Bitcoin and blockchain, I'm sure you are familiar with this. Bitcoin is an electronic internet currency or cryptocurrency that use blockchain to verify, authenticate, and establish trust for electronic file transaction. Bitcoin was initially created as an antidote to the inequities and corruption of the traditional financial system. It was the middlemen, the bankers, the trusted third parties who actually couldn't be trusted. These humans simply got in the way of other humans skimming profits and complicating transactions. This was taken from the Satoshi Nakamoto's paper on Bitcoin. Now, blockchain looks like this. We will write our transaction on every block, and with banking, for example, we write the transaction on our database, but with Bitcoin like this, we do the same, but using multiple parties. So every parties in the system will get its own ledger or database or block in the ledger system. And because of the structure of this chain block, then we call this as a blockchain. So blockchain is a single, universally accessible, distributed, and secure database that can be used as a digital ledger replicated around the world. There will also be miners who are detecting the transaction request, aggregate the transaction, validate the transaction, add them to the blockchain. This will make things final and tamper-proof and irreversible. And because of this, then consequently, it will be calculation intensive. It will be consume lots of energy. And because of that calculation, the miners will be paid in Bitcoins by providing new means. And the process of locking the blocks of this is called by hashing. It is quite impossible for us to cheat at Bitcoin because miners will compete with each other. They will add proof to add a block through multiple rounds, and the first one who can create a valid block will get paid in Bitcoin. This also prevents people from deleting previous transaction, and this will also keep the blockchain in sync with the whole system. But consequently, we have to realize that to keep the blockchain in order, it will be very expensive on computing power. It will consume lots of our electricity. There are two types of consensus mechanism. The first one is proof of work that are being adopted by Bitcoin. The second one is proof of stake that is being adopted by Ethereum. There are several other consensus mechanisms, but these two are the most popular one. Proof of work, because of the rigorous method, will consume lots of energy due to computational power that they have to do. But proof of stake is relatively cheaper in terms of energy use. It can be cost effective, but still it consumes energy as well. So this is the structure of proof of stake versus proof of work. You will see that from the case of Bitcoin, about 92% of Bitcoin energy consumption is equal to the whole country energy consumption of Sweden. So again, you have to realize that there are lots of energy being used to keep the Bitcoin in order. Regarding electricity consumption, in June 2017, Bitcoin miners were generating roughly 5 quintillion 256 bit cryptographic hash every second. That's a 5 with 18 zeros. And to fuel these estimates by independent researchers suggest it's around 500 megawatts. It's enough to supply 325,000 houses. And those miners usually concentrated in countries with cheap energy and loose regulation. The estimate for one Bitcoin transaction is 5,000 of the cost of a Visa transaction, because the focus is on robustness and reliability, not on the time and energy use. This is an example of miners called Bitmine. The center like this usually will be hidden. There are probably in developing countries with loose regulation and cheap energy costs. They are usually in remote parts, not famous for any infrastructure. And the considerations are climate, cost of electricity, as well as network speed. Bitmain like this will have about 21,000 machines. They can calculate 250 trillion hash per second, or about 4% of the computing power for the whole Bitcoin. So the final question is whether financial technology or fintech is part of the solution, or is it part of the problem? I want you to think about these questions, and I look forward to see you in class very soon.